Awesome. So unbelievable to be here. Thank you so much, and I'm actually really happy to share the stage with Dave. So on that note, just before we start, thank you, Meltwater. This is a great opportunity for us to present what we've built over the last couple of years. Yeah, we had wild stuff that we wanted to share. Probably too many stories, if you're asking me. Too many disinformation, propaganda, dissemination of weird stuff. We had to keep it short, for only 30 minutes. And then you guys are going to eat very quickly, I promise. But until then, it's just intrigue, scary stuff, you name it. So anyway, so don't worry about it, it's gonna be fine. Yeah, that's it. A quick intro about ourselves, just make sure it's working. So I'm Dan, I'm one of the co-founders and the CEO at Cyabra.
And I'm Dave. I look after digital crisis for Edelman. I also oversee our global counter disinformation unit.
All right, so much longer title than mine. Yeah, that's it. Please. I wanted to do a quick game, okay? And before we do that, here's my thought. By a show of hands, did anybody witness a scam or an impersonation of yourself or one of the brands that you're managing? Just show me a couple of hands just to feel that I'm not alone here, okay? So that's about, I'll say 1/4, if not bad. How about encountering an account that is weird?
Weird?
Weird, like there's something off, not like that weird. I mean like, you know, yeah. I mean like something off about the account, you're stopping and you're asking, I don't understand what's going on here, the intent, the nature, the way that it's pushing things. Is there a lot of people like that? Just to make sure that this is common. Okay, this is very common. Okay, great. So that's easy, right? Now, what I want to know is I want to understand what can the bad and fake guys accomplish with $10? Just 10. Here we go. Let's start. How many fake views can we accomplish with $10? How about 1,000 views? Is there anybody that think it's 1,000 views for $10? Not bad. I mean, it's not bad if not. It's like 100 a pop. Okay. Nobody. Right. How about 10,000? Okay. We've got a few folks. How about 100,000? Or 50,000? I want to see if you guys are listening. And the answer is 50. 50. That's $10, right? Okay, let's continue. Let's see what we get. How about the fake likes? 200. It's a lot for a brand. 200. Guys, come on. What are you talking about? This is a lot. No? Okay. 2,000?
I think they're onto you.
No, no. Let's end the slide. No, I'm just kidding. No, it's actually 20,000 likes. Yeah, and then of course the last one, number of comments. You know the answer. We won't bore you with the details. It's actually 500. So funny, right? $30, and you get 500 fake comments, 20,000 fake likes, and 50,000. What was it? Fake views. Insane, $30. I'm pretty sure that I can hear and see a lot of brands in that conference that would die to have this kind of engagement. That's what it costs for the other side to actually pollute conversations. $30. Let's do another game. Here we've got 3 types of accounts. We've got an Instagram account, a Facebook account, and a Twitter account, right? It's flipping back and forth, I'm sorry. I mean, they're pretty plausible. So, which one is the real one? First one. Is there anybody that thinks this is the real one? This guy? No? Okay. Wow, that was quick.
Two hands. Two hands.
Two hands?
Separate people.
Good. Where's my friends from college? And then you've got the second one, Facebook one, in the middle. It looked better. We can go back just to see if it's working. Good. This is going to be the second one with the Facebook in the middle. I mean, there's like 4,000 friends. So, is this the real one? All right. You guys have caught up to my trick. I see what you guys are doing. Well, it's tough, just to make sure. By the way, just so you know, the 3 of them are fake accounts. Now we can continue. And, just saying. And then, one small thing, we'll have a much bigger challenge. We have a happy hour cocktail kind of thing, I think at 5:30, am I right? I'm looking at Misha, oh my God, am I mistaken? And this is gonna be great. If you guys win the prize, there might be something, but this was an easy one. After that, we're gonna be having drinks with tougher questions. With that being said, I'm done with the games. Dave.
Ironic that I'm going to be here talking about trust for a second, right after you've just violated everyone's trust. So many of you may be familiar with the Edelman Trust Barometer. It's a study that we put out every year. We've been doing it for 25 years. This was actually our 25th anniversary. And it's a piece of research that looks at trust in society and the institutions in society. And we look at 28 different countries around the world. This year we talked to about 33,000 people. And the pattern of insights over the last couple of years has become pretty depressing when it comes to the state of our information ecosystem. And I don't think it's much of an exaggeration, in fact, at all an exaggeration to say that our information ecosystem is in crisis. Nearly 2/3 of people have trouble telling whether something is true or real, or credible online. 70% of people think that journalists are out to deliberately mislead, to deceive in service of profits for their organizations. And 3/4 trust someone like me as much as they trust credentialed experts. And so we're in this weird landscape right now, and we'll talk in a moment about what's fueling some of this, but where we're well down the path right now on a slippery slope to where we can no longer trust what we are seeing, what we're hearing, what we're reading online. And that has really significant consequences for us as a society. And this is really being fueled by a whole slew of different dynamics that are happening in society. We are seeing the weaponization of culture that is really driving polarization and politicization often in society. That is happening in a way that is effectively mutually reinforcing. These sides are getting increasingly weaponized against entities, against organizations. That is driving them further and further apart. That is fueling the additional effectiveness of this weaponization. And often this is being done for political or for monetary gain. We have a kind of a swinging pendulum of perspectives on societal issues. It's almost like Newtonian in the way that anytime there is a shift in one direction, there is a push back on that. And we're seeing that play out right now. And around DEI, you'll see that around climate change, you'll see that around stakeholder capitalism. And what we're seeing is these different sides are being polarized, to the earlier point, that's being exaggerated and exacerbated by a sense of grievance that is leading to a lot of people having a zero-sum mentality around issues. Meaning, if another side gets ahead, if someone else gets ahead, I'm seeing that as being a detrimental thing for me. Again, forces that are pushing us apart. We have the rise of internet research. We just actually put out a new piece of research from the Trust Barometer around health just in the last week. That showed that 38% of people in Gen Z are actually disregarding medical advice from professionals in service of peers or the internet. Really alarming. But it's happening, and it's not new. That's been going on for a few years now. It's just growing. We have geopolitical volatility, bad actors at a state level that are looking to capitalize on divisions. We're also seeing that geopolitical events actually just ripple across organizations as well. And then we have these algorithm-fueled echo chambers, which are where we are getting our information nowadays, and they are creating bespoke realities for each of us. What I'm seeing is not the same as what you see, which is not the same thing that one of our adversaries may see. And so our worldviews are becoming increasingly diverse and dispersed. So I would say a rich landscape, a really scary landscape from the perspective of society and from our ecosystem. And what we're talking about here is the challenges of misinformation and disinformation. And this is not just a side note or a curiosity for us nowadays. What's on screen here is a chart from the World Economic Forum's Global Risk Report, Global Risk Perceptions Report. And actually, so this research was launched in January this year. If I showed you the slide that was launched in January last year, it would look almost exactly the same. And what it shows us is that misinformation, disinformation, and the rise of AI in this kind of risk-focused context are top of mind as concerns. The number one concern for the next 2 years, the number 5 concern for the next 10 years. This isn't something that's just a side note that we can just disregard nowadays.
Oh, thank you. Well, concern. That's the main point of this whole thing. So, you know, I don't want to go over kind of the main ways that brands are being impacted. I actually want to go through some of the use cases and the explanations of why it's happening. So here's what we see. We see that brands are currently being targeted, and it's not random. There are entities and forces behind the scenes that are creating these narrative attacks and are orchestrating everything from the ground up. So it's not just bored people. It happens. But it's not just the bored people throughout COVID. It's much bigger than that. It's much more manipulative, and it's much more orchestrated, and that's the big issue over there. The bad actors are impersonating. Yes, they're impersonating the people, the executives. They're also impersonating channels and groups. Sometimes they impersonate customer support. You'd be surprised. You see just fake pages of the largest banks in the world where you have hundreds of people just going towards their channel and saying, oh my God, I've been logged out of my account, or I need help logging in back, or I've been scammed by this, can you send me an email? And it's just done so well, and it happens on every social media platform you can think of. And it's a massive problem, again, because it's well orchestrated and it happens in masses, and if you don't catch it early, it disseminates out there. You talked a little bit about the societal issues, and it's being weaponized. We've encountered, if we have encountered hundreds, we must have encountered thousands at this point. But large corporations and states and just countries out there that are being dragged into conflicts that are not theirs to begin with. Just imagine what happened in the last 2.5 years. We're talking about different wars, one on one side, one on the other side. We're talking about new elections. We're talking about anything you can dream of. And just these conflicts are just pulling these brands with them. And they're just dropping their names and the name of the chairwoman and the CEOs and you name it. And it's such a big one. Because if I'm putting myself in the shoes of a brand, I didn't want that. I didn't want to be there. I didn't want to be the CEO who's being talked about between the Ukraine-Russia conflict. What do I have to do with this? I don't have a presence in Ukraine. I don't have a presence in Russia. So, what's going on? So anyway, this is the third thing. And then, of course, we're talking about the deep fake and the synthetic media that is becoming a big thing. We just call it internally Hollywood, and Broadway has become weaponized for everybody. You get there, you have a click of a button, you put your face on somebody else's face, and suddenly you become, you know, Ned Stark of like Game of Thrones. That's a great one. That's a bad example. That is stupid. But think about the bad deepfakes. Think about the presidents of countries, prime ministers. Think about, again, you spoke about the executives of large brands that are suddenly saying, no, you know what? We actually regret launching this product. We're going to give it for free for the next 6 months. Oof, that hurts, man. That hurts a lot. Which brings me to the last one. If you're a publicly traded company and you're suffering from any of these things, usually it actually comes as a beautiful bundle, which is unfortunate. Shareholder value drops. Shareholder value drops. Trust is getting completely destroyed. Sometimes it takes years to become the biggest pharmaceutical company, to become the biggest food and beverage company in the world. And then what? Are we going to let 15 tweets, 7 comments, and a small bot farm who represents only 2% of the people talking about something, but it's actually affecting 95% of what people are seeing and hearing? That's it. This is the end of trust forever. That's a sad world. I told you it's a very sad presentation. I said it, but I just want to say. So, wait. As if it helps. Okay, so small confession. I'm older than I look. I'm 34. Okay, it's okay. That's the reality. And so ABC reminded me of that movie. If some people watched it, it's called Glengarry Glen Ross. It's like a super famous sales thing. I remember I was like 22 years old, like watching the movie over and over again without a bowing wing, just snapping at people saying, always be closing. This is not the one. This is not the one. I just wanted to see who's old enough to smile at what I'm saying. So it's not always be closing, it's ABC, actor, behavior, and content. Here's what I'm saying. I'm saying there's a framework. There's a framework, there's explanations for everything, and I wanted to kind of give you a small glimpse into how we put the lenses so that you guys can better understand. And the reason why I want to do that is because the barriers of creating accounts, fake accounts, bad accounts, has gone through the roof. The barriers are so, well actually no, it's not English. They've never been lower. Sorry, you guys understood. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I'm French. You know, it's like that. Creating fake accounts has never been easier. Mimicking behavior through softwares, generating fake content. What do you mean? It's like it's just boop, 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 boop. You get there. You're just done. You need to pay money to do it. It's non-existent money. So the actors are the entities that are orchestrating and pulling the strings. It's like the sock puppets, right? It's like the master sock puppet that's pulling everything inside of it. This is who we're dealing with. Sometimes the actors are well orchestrated, state-sponsored activities, right? From an enemy, another country that we are fighting with. Maybe not. Sometimes we saw it throughout COVID. Sometimes it's people bored at home. They are so unhappy with the vaccines and not doing anything. What are they doing? They're just yapping about stuff online. It's great because it's the nature of social media. But again, think about what we said earlier. It's like it's dragging your feet into things that you're just not interested in. So there's just so many different layers of what type of actors you can actually create. That could be an impact over your brand, over who you are, your nature, the why you exist as a company. And then the behavior, of course, it's you know, if the actor is the who, the behavior is the how. Once upon a time, you had to do everything manually. You had to log in. I'm just putting myself in the shoes of the bad and fake actors for a second. Okay, bear with me on this one. Once upon a time, you had to log in, and you had to like open different proxies and different windows, and have 17 different accounts on Chrome, and you know whatever it is that you're using for browsing, and then you're writing and generating content, and tweeting your friend, and you're amplifying some other stuff. Now you don't. There are softwares that are doing it, not for 17 accounts, for 5,000 of them simultaneously. With a click of a button, you don't need to have $1 million to do it, by the way. So the behavior, it's the way, it's the path that you're using to disseminate and propagate the things that you want to say. And then the C is the content. You need to contextualize what you're seeing, what you're hearing, reading, correct? Like it's insane. That whole place where you just don't understand if the pictures that you're facing, if the videos, is it only the lips? Is it only the shoulders? Is it the eyebrows moving to seem like the skepticism with the latest earning quarters of a publicly traded company? Can you imagine how easy it is to just be like, oh my God, the chairwoman seems so unhappy. What happens in the market the following day? Bam, 5%. Yeah, I know. Okay, we'll go through this quickly because we don't have a lot of time. This is a company called Google, and it's a big company actually. And Google almost suffered from a fake narrative, almost, which is why I could present it because I don't want to die soon. But Google had that thing with Jacqueline. Within hours, you have what, 0 likes and 0 comments, 22,000 views. And it's about the rumor that Google has been funding weapons for Putin for $100 million and they're receiving fines. I mean, it sounds ludicrous for most people, but most people in this room probably do not represent the other people outside of this room. Sometimes we are not as knowledgeable as certain topics, right? So we looked at it and we said, 2,000 retweets? No like, no comment. That's weird. We analyzed it with our software and realized that over 90% of the accounts that were retweeting the same thing were just fake accounts, just pushing and pushing and pushing like a propaganda machine. Now, they evaded the avalanche, the storm. It was just very, very close to being catastrophe. But we've seen examples like that happening tens of times per day, per brand, and some of them catch up and they become wildfire. So the whole point is to understand before it gets disseminated, to catch it when it starts stemming, right? That's the whole point. To make sure that you're not soon to be the next, hopefully not Google fake narrative. And it happens. Last but not least, and I'll let you talk on this, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. So this is 7 years in the making. We've been in the market for 7 years, and then we said, wait a second, there must be a solution that can actually sort of close the cycle. You want to go beyond just telling people, hey, log into the system, do the thing with the SaaS. Like it feels like the world is slowly shifting into different appetites. The way that they want to consume information, the way that they want to use SaaS products, and so on and so forth. So what we thought of doing is creating a very simple alerting system that requires zero training. Zero training, zero setup, 0 hours of manual input, nothing. You just say, hi, this is who I am. I'm worried about what happened last week in Peru and Mexico. You're done. I promise you, we can show it later if you guys want. It takes less than a minute, and we can concise everything into a small bubble of idea. Am I in the green? Am I in the yellow? Or am I in the red? And the whole point is to understand, if there's, it's not just the noise, it's not just the action, but it's actually also closing the cycle. Meaning, this might be the first system that is allowed to go out there and go from inputting something within a second with AI up to doing what we call mitigation with a click of a button. And that's something that, again, being sentimental as a French guy, we wanted to do something like that since we created the company. 7 years in the making. And it just so happens that we are here presenting it. So it's a big moment, and I think that's a big play for us, and that's a big play for the industry because people are craving for a full-blown solution. Maybe talking about narratives, I'll give you back the stage, I guess. And I'm just clicking through my stuff another 1,000 times now, which is okay. Sorry.
Okay, so we've covered off a few things here so far. We've established that the landscape out there is deeply depressing. We've talked about the barriers to this falling and the risks being present for a lot of brands. I want to close this out by starting to talk about what can we do about this beyond the monitoring piece. And I'm going to start with some principles. And there are two things that aren't on this slide that I think are really important to take away. Number one, the reality that we are living in right now is that the lie is always going to travel farther and faster than the truth. Because the lie is not weighed down by that burden of being tied to reality. And reality is usually pretty boring. There is no giant cabal taking over the world. X bad thing probably isn't really happening, no one's conspiring against you. But the lie doesn't have to worry about that. And because of that, you get really emotive stories. You get very graphic examples of things. Those get engagement. In our world nowadays, engagement drives visibility. And so there have been studies, MIT did a study, many of you may have heard of it because it travels a lot in these circles. They found that the lie will travel about 6 times farther and faster than the truth. So that's principle number one. Principle number two is it is much harder to convince someone to unbelieve something than it is to convince them to believe something from the start. So if I introduce you to David and I say, this is David, he kills puppies.
I'm not David.
That one struck a nerve. Doesn't matter what he then tells you about is the fact that he fosters puppies and he's a pet lover and all these things. You're going to have that little nugget in the back of your head and you're trying to disprove it. Much easier if he says, hi, I'm David, I love dogs, look at all the things I do, and then I come along later and I say, hey, but he does these things to puppies. Sorry, dog lovers. It's much harder for that lie to stick. So there's two principles fuel a lot of the thinking that we do around this. So number one, really important for brands to know your vulnerabilities, know your risk landscape, understand where you have points of vulnerability where things might stick reputationally, and then to start to monitor, as David just showed. Two, move proactively to build resilience around those areas. And we do a lot in the counter disinformation world, we do a lot of segmentation of audiences, and we'll often talk about exposed versus unexposed audiences. And when a lie hasn't traveled far yet, you've got a big opportunity to inoculate your audiences against that lie by building resilience and communicating proactively. And then your job to be done with your exposed audience, the people who might have heard the lie, is to then try and mitigate, contain that. Maybe you can convince them. But the first place people's heads go when we're talking about this stuff is always like, oh, how do we debunk that? How do we fact check it? And the reality is that fact checking on its own is not enough. That said, you do still need to prepare for what if something spikes. So knowing what your triggers will be for your escalation plans, building them out proactively, and then making sure that you're actually preparing and training across functions. This cannot just be a crisis comms thing. This actually needs to become part of your broader corporate reputations effort, but it goes beyond comms too. Often it won't necessarily be comms, it won't be you that's the credible spokesperson on these things. So working across the business to make sure that you've got the right preparation in place. We've talked a lot about disinformation, so weaponized attacks. I want to give an example though of something that's a broader threat, which is misinformation. And now I'm clicking all over the place, so I don't know what's actually going to work. There we go. So this is a real situation that happened. Company noticed that they were starting to get rumors about product safety that were circulating online. A bunch of Facebook groups had formed with people who were well-meaning, genuinely believed that there was a problem with the product. That started to spread. Those communities started to pick up traction. They started to get lots of eyeballs. They started to grow into the thousands and the tens of thousands. And then those groups got organized and the conversation broke out. They started to pitch media and they got media attention. And there was a major news cycle. Eventually regulators got involved. It spiraled out of control and it started with a few hundred people in Facebook groups. So that's what happened in the life cycle. I'll walk you through what the company did. So first off, as soon as it started to get signals that something was wrong, they dialed in their monitoring on the issue to start to understand what was going on, and they immediately started preparing. So we talked earlier about this idea of like, know your triggers, know your escalation thresholds. As it started to spread, and this happened over the course of like a few months, this wasn't necessarily like years in the making, so a lot of this stuff happened relatively rapidly. It started to spread. The company started proactive communication through its key stakeholders. Again, with the idea of getting ahead of the misinformation, communicate with people to build resilience against it so that when they saw it, they would disbelieve it. They started to source third-party testimonials. They started to train people in their channels. They started to prepare for reactive comms in case things actually continued to escalate. And then when they did escalate, it was quite dramatic. The people within these groups managed to get the attention of a tier 1 news reporter. Newspaper ran an article that basically said, people believe this thing. Experts don't agree, but they believe this thing. Company's stock price dropped 8% in one day. But within moments of that going out, the company was able to communicate directly to 150,000 of its key constituents, 140,000 I think it was, directly to its investors, directly to its employees. A whole bunch of reactive content went live. And they were able to contain the issue. The share price bounced back, sales remained high, but it was only because they moved quickly in the upfront and prepared proactive communication to try and constrain that issue that worked. So an example here, not necessarily of nefarious, weaponized, AI-focused, deepfakes, etc., but just stuff that is plaguing brands every day. And I'd say it's probably one of the top things that we are seeing companies be concerned about when we talk to them about their risk concerns. Last slide, and then we'll leave you to get to your lunch. 3 things you can do today. Number 1, understand your narrative risk landscape. What are your reputational threats that could be weaponized against you? Weaponized deliberately, weaponized inadvertently that people might glom onto. Understand what they are and make sure that you're actually thinking about that. Number 2, make sure that your crisis plans, your issues management plans are fit for purpose in this environment. A traditional crisis plan is not fit for purpose in this kind of landscape. The dynamics are different. In fact, a lot of the best practices in countering disinformation actually break crisis people's brains because you have to unlearn stuff that you've spent 20 years learning. Such as the idea of inoculating audiences proactively. And then lastly is, once you've identified those big narrative risk areas, start that work now. Don't wait for an issue to hit before you start building resilience. This has to be an all-of-company effort. This has to be a proactive piece that is built into your corporate reputation management. Because the more people are exposed to the issue, remember we talked about being hard to unlearn something, the more people are exposed to something, the smaller your unexposed audience gets. And you want to hit that audience when it's as big as possible so that you can try and inoculate yourselves against these issues. And with that, thank you all for your time.